Isn't it great to gather on a Monday? Don't you aren't Mondays like the most refreshing day? Like you wake up and you're so full of vigor and joy, and you just came off of a Sunday and you're like, woo, couldn't be better. And so, right? Remember back in the day they used to say every Monday morning I wrote a resignation letter? So, but yeah, well, I tell you, we're all doing all right, huh? Good deal. Good deal. So, how many of you say yesterday on a scale 1 to 10, how many of you say, hey, yesterday in our service was a 7 or above? How many of you say that? 10. Okay, good. 10's good, right? You know, it's important the criteria we use to measure. You know, when I was in my first pastorate at Northfield, the criteria I used to measure every Sunday was how many people showed up. And boy, that was a roller coaster ride, right? Because some days I was like, woo, and it didn't take much. I mean, it only took 4 people to move the needle. 4 people, I had a 10% increase. You know, so I was like, yeah, percentages were a big deal. Yeah, and 44 today. I was really pumped about it. And then the next week I had 32. No, that's bad. And I used to go home, and I don't know, I used to go home, and the first thing I would do, and my wife would get upset with me, but I would pull out my little legal pad, and I would write everybody that wasn't there. Did you ever do anything like that? You still do it? Yeah. We don't quite do it that way anymore, but man, I used to do it like boom, 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 boom. And then Monday, I called everybody that wasn't there. So, isn't that crazy? But anyhow, is that what you do? Oh yeah. So anyhow, but you know, I think a great criteria to measure how Sunday went is the Lord's presence in our midst. You know, and so in fact, this may be a you know, I've even stopped. I don't even look at Sunday per Sunday anymore. You know what I mean? I've tried to move that whole thing over to the side, and every once in a while, you know, when we have board meeting, we look at the graph or so forth. But that's something I try to avoid on a weekly basis because although I love roller coasters, I grew up about 20 minutes from Cedar Point. You know, I don't like the emotional roller coaster. So, but anyhow, good stuff. Hey, I want to give you a little reminder and cast a little bit of a perspective about what we've been attempting to do through Pcdc. And, you know, we're getting ready to plan next year. And so, but here's kind of a little bit of an outline that we put together that would drive Pcdc in our minds. So it's just right. It's just kind of one of these things that we're going to say to kind of get an idea of what we're doing when we gather. So here's what it is. I have to put my glasses on. So it's know God, know yourself, know your church, know your community, and know your strategy. Okay, that's kind of been a guiding principle for when we started. You know, when Carrie asked me to come on board, I think that way. And what do we want to do? Where do we want to go? How do we want this thing to function? So a few of us got together and talked it through and got Carrie's, you know, seal of approval. But know God, know yourself, know your church, know your community, know your strategy. And this year we've been really focusing on this idea of both knowing God but knowing yourself in relationship with God. And so we've done a lot of different things, right? We've done strength finders. Mark did that, being able to tell your story. Today we're doing Myers-Briggs. Next month, we're going to do something that really is built off of Myers-Briggs, but it's called the 5 Voices. And a fella from our church that's in charge of leadership training for Lockheed Martin will be here, and he's going to deliver the 5 Voices training. And I will send you this month. Did everybody get an invitation this month, like a little invitation that said Pcdc, and then it had a, yes, I'm staying for lunch, no, I'm not, button on it? Okay. We're going to do that we're going to send that every month, and then we'll have, if there's anything for you to do, there will be a little assessment to take, right? It's a part of the knowing yourself process. And there'll be a little assessment to take. It'll only take you 15 minutes to take it for next month, but hopefully you took one this month, or you know what your Myers-Briggs is, as Rocky's going to come share with us. But next month, that'll be happening. You'll get the email for that, so look for that. And then if you plan to stay for lunch, and I want to give you this little bit of information. If you plan to stay for lunch, it really helps us in the cafe. So our cafe opened up this weekend. So all the lunches will be served through the cafe. It's about it'll be a $10 cost for lunch, and I think there's a salad and a soup and a sandwich and dessert and a drink, and so non-alcoholic drink. But if you're wondering about that, it's just a non-alcoholic drink. So yeah, this is a BYOB if you know that. So, but if you do, you'll be in big trouble. So no. But anyhow, make sure that if you plan on staying for lunch, that you click that. That just helps the cafe manager be able to do that. But in that note, there'll be any links that you need to go to, anything you need to know for preparation for the upcoming one. Our staff just went through the 5 Voices training at our retreat last week, and Bill DeBenny, here delivered it. It was fantastic. So it's a great training. You won't want to miss it. And he talks about the weapons we use, what our voices are, how loud our voices are. It's built off of Myers-Briggs, so this is a great foundation and great understanding you're going to get today. But anyhow, we look forward to that coming next month also, as we look forward to today. Well, Pastor Carey, do you have anything to say?
Well, always. Just so I don't forget, give you the education number for today. I'll do that now. You do get 4 hours. Let me get here in case people are watching online. You get 4 hours on your education credit, and the number is going to be for this session today 16060. 16060. If you need some help setting that up, you can look to somebody that's taking notes right now. They probably know how. But this is a continuing education. And if you have any other questions as we move along, you can ask those. I may share some information toward the end, but I want to get the boat in the water. And thank you, Pastor Dave, for opening the doors, turning the heat on, all that stuff for us. We are grateful. Very.
Thanks. So we love our district superintendent, don't we? So how many of you, he slept in your parking lot? Anybody? That's happened for you so far? Yeah, that's good. His camper's retired for the winter. I think it's coming back this summer. But great, let's say a word of prayer, and then we're going to turn it over to Rocky. So Jesus, we do thank you for just the ability to gather together this morning and to be able to share hearts, be able to learn together, be able to grow together. And Lord, whenever we take a look at something like this, boy, we get it. Man, self-leadership, self-knowledge, having mirrors in our life, it's so incredibly important. Sometimes it's very difficult to see ourselves and to lead ourselves. So Jesus, thank you for the opportunities that we have where we can participate in that. And Lord, we just pray that today, that you speak to us in very definite ways about ourselves through your Spirit, through Rocky. We love you, Jesus, and speak to us today. In your name, amen. Amen. All right, Rocky, come lead.
Hey, what's the password?
I paid him to do that. Yeah, that's right. Yes, I do. Yeah. Well, we are going to definitely be talking about something today that is something I have used for many, many years.
Stay in my phone,
It's a tool that I believe that everybody should know how to use. You should know yourself. You should know how you interact with other people. And so I hope by the end of today you will come out of here knowing how to better use your personality and how your personality works with other people. It's really an interesting thing to me, and I hope you will walk out of here today going, I've got to find out more information about this because this is just cool stuff. So I want to just start out just telling you a little bit about myself. some of you may or may not know this, and you might be saying, why are you up there talking about this? I'm one of those pastors that opted, instead of getting an MDiv, I got a master's in counseling. And so I actually had a test and assessment class that's been a huge part of our class on the Myers-Briggs. And so in getting my master's in counseling, it's been a tool that I've not only used in counseling, but I have used in everything. I've used it as I've chosen staff. I've used it as I work with a team of people, like my church board. Every church board meeting, the first meeting of the year, especially the new church board members that are joining the team, I'll hand them a Myers-Briggs and say, I need this from you, and I want to see how you interact with the rest of us. We actually have a chart that we keep on staff, and we pass this chart, every single retreat, which we have a retreat every single year. And it has 3 things on it. It has, first of all, it has the strength finders, which we've already talked about. It has spiritual gifts, and it also has Myers-Briggs. And so on this chart, we show the church board, and then we also show the staff, and we look at how all 3 interact with each other. It's amazing when you put those pieces together, the picture that is painted. Sometimes it's an exciting, and sometimes it's a little frustrating, because you don't always, especially with like your church board, right? It's an election, and sometimes you get on somebody on the church board that may be completely opposite of your personality, or sometimes personalities can clash. And so as all of us as pastors know that, and so sometimes you get somebody on your team that may not be exactly the best fit, but you still learn how to work with them. And if you understand their personality, then good things can come out of it. I want to do a little activity before we get started in the material. This will take 5 minutes or less. 5 minutes, because I'm going to give you 5 minutes to do it. It just take a few minutes to get everybody organized here. But first of all, I want, just by a show of hands, how many have their Myers-Briggs letters, the results? How many was able to take that? Okay, most everybody in here. I think there's only a few that I see that do not have your hands up. Even if you didn't take the personality inventory, you will still be able to take this information. I still encourage you to do this, but using this information, you'll be able to figure out from there how to fit all these puzzle pieces together. What I'd like to do for the activity, if you took your letters and your personality inventory, Myers-Briggs, you should have come up with 4 letters, and I'm going to touch on the last letter in this activity. So it's J or P. Okay, so you're either a J or P, judging or perceiving, J or P. So what I want you to do is, if you are a J, raise your hands. Okay, all of you that are J's, if you'll go back to the back of the room over here, and if you will get in groups of, let's say, 6 or 7, something like that. All of you that are P's, if you will gather on this side of the room, up front here. Anybody who's a P, perceiving, come over here on this side of the room. And if you'll do the same, if you'll get in groups of 6 or 7, so you'll have to divide yourself up a little bit. P's over here, J's over there. If you did not take the personality inventory and you're wondering where you fit in, just join one of these groups, if you will, and then you may be more of an observer than a participant, but at least you'll get the feel of what's taking place here. All right, what I'd like you to do in groups of 6 or 7, so you'll need to break your big group up into a couple groups, 2-3 groups of 6 and 7, and if you will take an opportunity, your job is to plan a party. Plan a party. It can be any kind of party, a birthday party. It can be a retirement party. It can be a church party, any kind of party. But your job is to simply plan a party. That's all you have to do. Yes? Question?
We don't have parties with Christians. We have fellowship.
Sorry. Fellowship. Plan a fellowship. Thank you.
Just want to help you out.
Oh, thank you. Go for it.
Sorry, man. Sorry. Yeah.
All right, so good J's, we're gonna have a party, we have to decide. Each, we have to decide what we're gonna do.
Venue.
Pork barbecue ribs.
Pork barbecue ribs, I like it.
Coleslaw.
The venue.
The venue, is it indoors or outdoors?
Outdoors.
Outdoors for the
This is
barbecue.
the pool party.
No.
No, Christians don't get that.
Yeah, it's not a pool party.
You're gonna bring mixed meat in.
Sorry. I thought we were going with it all
It's
the
out
way.
in the woods.
No soap.
And we just butchered our wild pigs.
Big roast barbecue.
Yeah.
All right, so that's what we're eating, that's where we're doing it.
Somebody else's backyard.
Somebody else is gonna clean it up.
When?
Right?
Time of year.
Time of year. Well, it's outdoors. So
Yeah, so it'll be warm.
Just about 2.5 more minutes. Just 2.5 more minutes.
after Memorial Day, so we gotta pick a weekend, right? So who, what, when, where? What am I missing? Why
Music.
and how? Well, music, what? That's part of the what?
Yep.
Yeah, entertainment.
Who's
Somebody from the
invited?
Cowboy Church.
Live music. Rock music. Yeah.
Elvis.
Right, I think it'd be country gospel, country gospel. I've got just the guy. Dave Booth.
What else we need?
Who's invited?
Who's invited?
Are we inviting stuff? Are we having stuff for kids? Are we?
Now, we need committees, right? Because we gotta get a committee, somebody's gonna handle the food, who's gonna take care of the food, who's gonna take care of the entertainment, who's gonna get the location,
The invites?
the invites, that's all that kind of stuff, it's all about throwing the party. The details, who's taking care of the details on this?
I'll take care of the invite.
Oh, you got the invites, that's good, so.
I'll take location.
I'll take location, that's all good. Then now's the time.
I'll send out an email to everybody.
And, how
Okay, if you'll come back to where you're sitting, come on back. Just figure out a person in your group that will share the results really quick.
No. That's the way we did it anyway. But it doesn't always. These are complicated. Go ahead. Go through your order.
We're good to go.
Okay, I think about 3 groups each. Yeah, come on back, 3 groups each. Just find somebody that will talk for your group, that will share the results. We're going to start with the P's first. The P's first. So if you were a P group, and I think, again, I saw about 3 groups over on this side over here. Just any of the 3 P's groups, somebody from each of those groups, just quickly tell us how you would plan that party. Go for it.
So we are throwing a party for a 10-year-old girl.
Woo!
It's going to be a Minecraft themed party with cupcakes, square cupcakes that we build into a tower. And then we're going to play, we have a zombie pinata. You kill zombies in Minecraft. And then yeah, then we're gonna play a 4 game where we have like 50 boxes, and then people are gonna build a house out of it, and then the other people are gonna destroy their house with water balloons.
Okay, all right, very good. Another P group. Go ahead.
We're not that expensive, but we're gonna have an outdoor cookout in the spring with burgers, steaks, and some happy music playing, and and some Somebody's bringing friends, right? He's bringing friends, so.
Okay. Very good. I think there was one more P group, right? Okay.
4th of July barbecue, cornhole, horseshoes, DJ, and a water slide, possibly a magician, and food, hot dogs, hamburgers, grilled out.
Okay. Very good. Very good. All right. The J groups. One of the. I think there were 3 over here too, maybe. So one of the J groups. Somebody share.
We decided not to have a party. If we do have to have a party, we will just cater.
Okay. All right. Another J group.
We're going to have a retirement party for BW. We're having a retirement party for BW at his church where he's serving. And we know the things that we need to tackle, but we didn't get any of them done. So we know we have to figure out who's coming and guest lists and all that kind of thing, but nothing got done.
Okay. All right.
It's gonna happen.
The next one.
So we were planning a birthday party for Carrie Willis,
Okay.
And so, of course, one of the things is several in the group kept trying to hand out responsibilities to others so that it would be organized and structured. But we did decide we were going to rent a party boat because it's on the water. It's from North Carolina. We were going to serve, vinegar-based barbecue. I don't even know if you like that, Carrie, but that was kind of our plan. But
Okay. Very good. Very good. I don't know if you could see the differences, but there was clearly some obvious differences between the J's and the P's. Can you pick out the differences? Anybody? There are quite a few.
They're always louder.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We wanted a task list, what needs to be done, categorize it, and what to do.
Absolutely. A task list, organization, delegation came from the J groups. In fact, the one group said that they would just delegate it to somebody else to come up with all the details, right? That's a typical J. Absolutely. What else? Absolutely more creative. Absolutely. No question. What else? A couple more things maybe. Very good. You guys are right in tune. Did you notice too that within the groups there was the interaction? There was more of a party scene over here, but also the interaction among the members. You saw quite a difference of how they interacted with each other, as far as everybody having an idea and something to do, and over here they would stop and listen to someone, and then go on to the next person. It was more organized, even approach in how they were discussing it. We're going to get a lot into this today. There's no question. We're going to have some fun. I've got some fun stories to share with you today too about this. We're going to dig right into it though. If you look up here, the slides, and did everybody get a handout sheet? All of these slides are there in the handout if you want to take that with you. But just a little bit of a quick introduction of what Myers-Briggs is all about, and then we're going to get into the meat of what the letters are and how to interpret it, how to work together as a team, all those pieces. First of all, the Myers-Briggs is a personality inventory to make the theory of psychological types understandable and useful in people's lives. The essence of the theory is that much seemingly random variation in the behavior is actually quite orderly and consistent, being due to the basic differences in the ways individuals prefer to use their perception and judgment. We're going to be talking about how these pieces come together. Perception, the next slide there. Perception involves all the ways of becoming aware of things, people, happenings, and ideas. Judgment involves all the ways of coming to conclusions about what has been perceived. If people differ systematically in what they perceive and in how they reach conclusions. then it is only reasonable for them to differ correspondingly in their interests, reactions, values, motivations, and skills. And that's Carl G. Jung, by the way, who the Myers-Briggs really was based on his philosophy. If you want to do a whole lot more research on this, just look up Carl G. Jung and where he started with this, and there'll be more information that you really have time to read there. But a little bit more of the history of the Myers-Briggs. I've actually had so many people through the years say, well, isn't Myers-Briggs an old thing now? Like there's all these new personality tests that are coming out, and Myers-Briggs seems to be the old one. So why is that still important compared to others? And that's a great question. Let's get into a little bit of the history and the validity of the Myers-Briggs and why it's still important today. The history of it, the psychological type was introduced in the 1920s by Carl C. Jung, and the Myers-Briggs was developed in the 1940s by Isabel Briggs Myers, and the original research was done in the 40s and 50s. In developing the Myers-Briggs personality inventory, the aim of Isabel Briggs Myers and her mother, Catherine Briggs, was to make the insights of the type theory accessible to individuals and groups. Millions of people worldwide have taken the indicator each year since the first publication in 1962. It's interesting, as I did more research on that, it is estimated that 1.5 million people annually take the Myers-Briggs personality inventory. So let's get into the next slide, which has to do with the validity of it. Hundreds of studies over the last 40 years have proven the instrument to be both valid and reliable. In other words, it measures what it says it does, its validity, and it produces the same results given more than once the reliability. It's interesting that if you take this same personality inventory and you give that same inventory over and over and over a person, again, over to a person, it may change slightly, but it's going to be pretty much the same results each time. Here's something interesting. I don't know if you know this, but our personalities are made up of both nature and nurture. You are given a personality by God. You were born with it. You have, if you watch an infant around 1.5 years old, you can quickly see a personality that is starting to develop and coming out. Nobody taught that baby anything. God gave that baby his or her personality. But here's the interesting thing. Our personality can be affected by our nurture. So our nurture is the surroundings that we grow up in, right? It's our parents, it's our grandparents, it's our friends, it's our teachers, it's our churches. It's all of those things that have an influence on our personality. And so with those two things, once your personality is developed, and it's usually around the teenage years, believe it or not, it still can develop somewhat a little bit later, but for the most part, it's developed around the teenage years. And what's interesting is if you give that same personality test 50 years later in their life, it's going to be a very similar results. It might vary slightly. And here's the thing with any kind of tests and assessments. If you do any kind of study on psychological testing, there is always variations in that. It has everything to do with was the person well that day that they took the test? Were they attentive? Did they have the right amount of sleep? Were they upset about something? Did something happen that morning that changed their whole perspective of that day? All of those factors take into play. And so certainly if you take the test an hour from when you first take it, it might be slightly different. But as a whole, it does come with the same results over and over and over. The next slide there, and I guess I was going to do the clicker, and I'm sorry I'm not doing. You're doing a good job. Keep it up back there. This is the letters that you'll come up with the Myers-Briggs. It's either extroverts or introverts, sensors or intuition or intuitives, thinkers, feelers, judgers, and perceivers. let's get into this, because I want you to understand each of these characteristics and these letters, and I'm going to share some examples and stories with each of these that I think and I hope you'll be able to understand a little bit better how to work with each of these areas. So this first one, dealing with extrovert and introvert, it really has to do with the favorite world. Do you prefer to focus on the outer world or your inner world? So let me just, before we go any further, how many in this room, by a show of hands, are extroverts? Quite a few. Quite a few. All right. How many in this room are introverts? Okay. Very good. All right. Let's get into the definition and help you understand a little bit more about this. People who prefer extroversion tend to focus on the outer world of people and things. When you are extroverting, you are energized by what goes on in the outer world. And this is where you tend to direct your own energy. Extroverts usually prefer to communicate more by talking than by writing. And they need to experience the world in order to understand it, and thus tend to like action and variety. So here's some points, some sub-points to understand. Extroverts prefer action and interaction over reaction, or reflection rather. They talk things out to gain understanding. They prefer oral communication, and they take initiative in social and work settings. Will get involved in social activities to re-energize. So just a summary real quick of extroverts. People that are extrovert typically are more people. They like to be around people more of the time than to be alone. Certainly, and here's the interesting thing. On each of these characteristics, there's a scale. And you get a number with the Myers-Briggs, and you find out if you're more on one end of the scale or you're more at the lower end of the scale. So, for example, for some of you, you might test as an extrovert, but at the same time, you may be a weak extrovert. Does that make sense? So there is a scale, but your dominant behavior, personality, is an extrovert. And so when you look at extroverts, people that are extroverts, they tend to want to talk things out. I'll just tell you that if you know an extrovert, and if they're struggling with something, they have to talk it out to resolve it. Extroverts think out loud. That's what they do. I've had so many people say to me over the years, Rocky, why do you keep changing your mind all the time? And I'm like, no, I'm not changing my mind. I'm thinking out loud. Like, I'm processing it while I'm talking to you. And so I might start a conversation saying, let's do this. And the more I talk, I'm like, no, that's not what we're going to do. We're going to do this. And it's because I've just thought the process through by verbally talking about it. Now, introverts are complete opposite of that. So let's get into introverts. People who prefer introversion focus more on the inner world. When you're introverting, you are energizing by what goes on in your inner world, and this is where you tend to direct your own energy. Introverts tend to be more interested and comfortable when they can work quietly without interruption. I'm sure all of us know people like that. We can just point out who they are, and we don't even have to give them a personality inventory. They like to understand the world before experiencing it, and so need time to reflect before acting. So here's some subpoints. Introverts prefer reflection over action. They think things through to gain understanding before opening their mouth. Prefer written communication, like working alone or with one or two others, and will spend time alone to re-energize. So let's just kind of do a little summary here. So for some of you that are introverts in here, you tend to really find where you re-energize yourself is not when you're around people. In fact, it can be the opposite. You can actually feel like you're just exhausted after being around people for a long period of time. And so you actually have to get alone by yourself, and you have to do some thinking. And the more you think, the more you spend some time alone, believe it or not, that re-energizes you, and you're ready to go back out and win the world again. It's interesting. How many in here, just by a show of hands, you are one or the other, extrovert or introvert, but you married your opposite? How many in here? A lot of people, right? You know, opposites attract. And you'll find that all the way through this. Opposites attract. I was talking with Kerry Willis. He's opposite with his wife on every one of these. All 4 characteristics. So opposites attract. And I have a saying that opposites attract but eventually attack. And so here's what happens in personalities. We are naturally drawn to the other personality when it comes to our spouses. When we're looking for a spouse, a mate, we're naturally drawn to that other personality. But what's interesting is over time, we get tired of the opposite and we begin to try to change them to become more like us over time. And sometimes, obviously, we do it not even knowing that we're doing it. But as I have worked with so many, many couples with marriage counseling over the years, I'll find where opposites are married and they were fine the first 2-3 years of marriage, and all of a sudden they're doing nothing but fighting all the time. And I'll ask them, have you ever taken a personality inventory? And their answer is no. And I'll say, let's do that. And I'll sit and go over the results with them, and I'll tell them where their arguments are before they even tell me. And they're like, how did you know that? And it's just obvious, because there's normal behavior that an extrovert will do, and there's normal behavior that an introvert will do. I will find in most marriages that are extrovert, introvert, where the extrovert is wanting to invite friends over all the time. They're wanting to be social. They're wanting to go hang out with their friends and wanting their spouse to come along with them. And their spouse is going, no, I need some home time. I want to spend time with just you in our house here. And the other spouse is going, why? What's going on here? You find with extroverts and introverts that the extrovert is saying, how come the introvert never talks to me? I have this problem, and they never want to resolve this issue. They never want to talk about it. And the introvert's going, well, I don't understand. I've thought about it, and I resolved it. And it's interesting. Introverts will actually think about something when there's a conflict, and they'll think about it for quite some time, and then they will resolve it in their mind. The problem is they never share it with the extrovert because they're introverts. And so the extrovert's going, there's a problem. We gotta talk this out. We gotta work this out. And the introvert's going, what problem? What's going on? Yes.
Rocky, you just presented that from the perspective of an extrovert. Let me present it from the perspective of an introvert. My wife has a filter. It is 5 feet outside of her head. My filter is inside.
Right.
I filter things before I say
Sure.
them, caring about how they will affect her.
Right.
She thinks about how they might affect me after she has already said it.
There you go. There you go. And you
This is the extrovert-introvert issue.
absolutely.
Her coffee filter is not useful at all because it's way outside of her face.
Absolutely, and you hit the nail right on the head there. Absolutely, 110%. Here's an interesting thing too with introverts. They want to think it through, but here's the deal with introverts. It's amazing to me that introverts, they obviously want to be kind and considerate. They want to think it through. They want to say the right thing. Do you know when you press on and if you've ever gotten in a serious disagreement or argument with the opposite, so let's say if your spouse is opposite, and if you press an introvert, if an extrovert presses an introvert and says, no, we have to talk about this now, and we don't give the introvert time to process and think about it, do you know the introvert will say things that they really don't mean? They say things that will be very hurtful because they haven't had time to process it and be able to get their thoughts in an organized, good way before they talk about it. So that's very important what you just said there. extroverts have to learn to give introverts time to process, time to talk about it. Here's an interesting thing I often say to husbands and wife. Many times a husband or wife that is an extrovert, as soon as their introvert spouse comes home from work, the minute they walk in the door, they're wanting to talk their ear off. The introvert has just come from an extrovert world where they have been around people all day long, and they need some alone time. They need some quiet time. But that extrovert that they're married to is going, hey, how was your day? Let's talk about it. What's going on? Hey, let me tell you about my day. And they're talking a mile a minute, and the introvert's going, I need a break. I need some moments here. And obviously, again, where you are on this scale, whether you're extreme extrovert, where you're extreme introvert, or somewhere in the middle, it's how you're going to handle the situation. I've got a funny story. I asked Kevin if I could share this story on the way here. Kevin Griffin. We've obviously done all of our assessment personality tests with our staff, and the two over there, which I'll use in another example over there, JJ, he's our youth pastor, came early this year, and Chris Shelter, all of you know him, JJ Wazinski and Chris Shelter. I was talking to Kevin, and we were talking about personalities, and Kevin, one day, a couple weeks ago, was working in his office, and JJ just shows up in his office and brings his computer and starts working right there in his office with him. Now, all three are, by the way, extroverts, but JJ as as far highest extrovert as you can possibly get. And so JJ wanted just to socialize and work while they were in the same office there. And Kevin was like, oh, okay, this is great. And so was working right along with him, and everything was great. And then the next day, he knew he had to study, so he thought, all right, I'm going to find a room that I can go to, and I can really study and take some time. And so here comes JJ and Chris looking for him to find him and sit down with him and say, what are you doing here? Let's work together. And they just wanted to be around him. Now again, Kevin is an extrovert, but he's not as extreme or extrovert as JJ is. But you can see the differences and how personalities make huge difference in who we are, everything about us. So just a summary. The next slide there, extroversion and introversion. This first pair of styles is concerned with the direction of your energy. If you prefer to direct your energy to deal with people, things, situations, this outer world, then your preference is extroversion. If you prefer to direct your energy to deal with ideas, information, explanations, or beliefs, your inner world, then you prefer introversion. So this next area let's look at, it's information. Information. It's this next set of characteristics here. Do you prefer to focus on the basic information you take in, or do you prefer to interpret and add meaning? This is called sensing and intuition. Sensing focuses on the realities of a situation. Sensing types need to accept and work with what is given in the here and now, and thus become realistic and practical. They are good at remembering and working with a great number of facts. They prefer to use proven procedures and are careful with detail. So here's some subpoints to break that down. Sensing people gather facts and details. They focus on their five senses. They are more present-oriented. They are patient with routine. And they concentrate on specific details. Now, sensing people are absolutely your detailed people that care about dotting the I's and crossing the T's. They're the ones who want to make sure that everything is taken care of. I'll tell you a story about that in just a minute, but I want to go on to the intuitive side, and then we'll certainly come back and compare the two. So intuition shows you the meanings, relationships, and possibilities that go beyond the information from your senses. Intuitive types look at the big picture and try to grasp the overall patterns. They grow expert at seeing new possibilities, and they value imagination and inspiration. So here's some subpoints to help you summarize this one. Intuition, look at patterns and relationship. They focus on what lies beyond the surface. They're future-oriented, patient with complexity, and they concentrate on the big picture. So here's the two. Obviously, you can see the major difference between these two. But I'll just tell you, you'll quickly know my personality as I go through this. I'm telling on myself. But I am certainly the intuition. And so I know that when I form my team, I have to have a balance of both people that are intuitive and people that have this sensing characteristic. You want a balance on your team. And here's why. I'm always looking at the big picture. As a pastor of the church, and you know this, you have to keep in mind the big picture of where you're going and what all is going on. You've got all these moving parts that are constantly going on, and you've got to know where all those moving parts are. You've got to know your direction, where you hope to go. You have the big picture. But you have to place people on your team that have the details as well. And so for me, I have 3 people that are on my staff that all they do is they worry about the details. And I can't tell you how many times that I'll plan something and they'll come up to me, well, Pastor Rocky, did you forget about this, this, and this? And sometimes I will say, absolutely, I forgot about this, this, and this. And sometimes I'll say, no, I thought about it, but I just haven't worked those details out yet. But you need a team, especially in ministry, of both, because you're always looking at the big picture, but yet you're always looking at the details too. And if you don't have a balance of the two, then it's going to really be off. Let me give you a great example of this. Let me just give you a scenario to start with. And we'll just see in this room. I haven't asked you yet who in this room is the intuitive, who here is the sensing. So let me just give you this scenario. And you tell me with A or B which of these options you would do. So let's say you get up in the morning and you had already planned to go to the shore. But you get up and you turn on the TV and you notice on the weather report that it's an 80% chance that it's going to rain. Now, you look at the radar and you see the line of storms that are coming. Now, it's later in the day, but there's a line of storm that is definitely coming. And it's an 80% chance of rain. So, here's the 2 choices. Would you, A, cancel your plans and choose to go another day? B, would you take the chance and go onto the shore anyway? So, how many would do A, which is to cancel your plans and go another day? Raise your hand if you're A. Okay, out of those A, how many of you are sensing? Several. Okay. All right. All right, let's do the next one. So how many of you would like to possibly just take the chance and go with the 80%? Okay. How many of you are intuitive? Do you see all the hands that went up? People that are detail-oriented, they're on the ground. When I'm doing marriage counseling, I usually tell people you're the person on the ground, and the intuitive person is the person up in the clouds. The sensing person is the one who's very realistic in their approach, very matter of fact. And then the person in the intuitive side, they're the people that are always looking at possibilities. So, for example, the example I just gave you with the weather, most people that are sensing would say, there's no way I'm going. I see the line of storms. I hear the forecast. So remember the senses, your 5 senses. You're using your 5 senses. You're hearing, you're seeing. You know that something's going to happen, and so you reschedule. There's no way. But for the intuitive side, those people that are more on the hopeful possibility side, looking for patterns and possibilities, you're saying, wait a minute, it's an 80% chance. There's a 20% chance it's not going to rain. And not only that, I looked at the radar, and it's later in the day. We could go to the shore and spend all day long and be tired of the beach by the time the storms come and be ready to come home and it's raining on the way home. Can you tell what I am? I'm the intuitive side, for sure. The picture I paint is there's always possibilities. Now, here's the interesting thing. As I've dealt with marriage counseling, each of these characteristics you can struggle within your personalities in your marriage, but I have to say, if you have an extreme sensing person, an extreme intuitive person with intuition, I'm just going to tell you there is going to be a major clash that will happen a lot. Because one's going to be always looking at the facts and saying, this is real. And the other person's always going to be looking for the patterns and possibilities and saying, this is the beautiful picture that I'm able to paint. And the other person's saying, look at what I'm seeing. And the other person saying, no, you're not being hopeful. Do you see? And the argument starts. And it goes back and forth, back and forth. Again, when it comes to ministry teams, though, I encourage you to get both. You can't have one or the other. And actually, in all these characteristics, you want a variety. All right, let's look at the next one. It's decisions kind of describes this next area. When making decisions, do you prefer to first look at logic and consistency, or first look at people and special circumstances? This is called thinking and feeling. Thinking types make decisions objectively on the basis of cause of effect, by analyzing and weighing the evidence. A plus B equals C. Very logical thinking. Thinking focuses on this logical consequence or any choice or action. Thinking types seek an objective standard of truth. They are good at analyzing what is wrong with someone. Now here's the subpoints. Thinking-based decisions on logical analysis. Analytical. Perceived as reasonable. Guided by cause and effect reasoning. Want things to be fair. So, there you go. Thinking. Somebody that is just very logical in the way they think. And when it comes to making decisions, even though people may be important to them, it's really not important enough to factor into making the decision they need to make. And again, it depends on where you are in the spectrum, whether you're extreme or slightly. That obviously has a big difference there too. Let's look at decisions with feeling. Feeling types make decisions based on person-centered values. Person-centered values. When deciding, they consider how important the choices are to themselves and others. They like dealing with people and tend to become sympathetic, appreciative, and tactful. They value harmony and work to make it happen. So let's give you some subpoints with feeling. They base decisions on personal values. They're sympathetic and perceived as compassionate, guided by personal beliefs, and want things to be harmonious. So here's interesting about the two, and I'll get in and explain here just a little bit more here. But thinking and feeling, this is quite interesting. Somebody that is a thinker, when they make their decisions, again, they're more looking at the logical things of life. They're not looking at how this affects other people. People-centered, this feeling side are more people-centered, and they want to make a decision based on how will this affect other people. They care about people. And so here's what's interesting. I give you this scenario. So if you were planning an event and there was a certain amount of seats that were available, and you had to send out invitations for this event, and you knew the certain amount of invitations that you send out has a dollar amount, and so you have a max budget to work with. And the bottom line is if you choose to go above this certain amount, then you're going to pay twice the price per person above that. Depending on where you are on this scale. If you're a thinking person, you're going to look at the logical side of that. You're going to say, there is no way we're going to pay double the price per person. Ain't no way. We're not going to do it. We're only going to do what we're allowed to have, and that's it. If, on the other hand, you're the feeling side of things, and you really care about somebody, you will be willing to pay out of your pocket the extra amount just not to hurt somebody's feelings. You see the big difference? Huge. And so in ministry, I have to say this one is a biggie. This one's a biggie. Because what one person may do in ministry may be completely different. I have to share with you, my dad and I are opposite on this one trait. The other areas, we're the same. But on this one, he is a true thinker. He thinks things out. Whatever's logical, he does. And he has shared that sometimes he makes decisions that may or may not hurt somebody's feelings. And he goes on with it because that's illogical. I'm, on the other hand, more the feeling side. I make decisions, and I really do have a logical side. But there are times when I'm going, you know what? The people matter more. And so I'll weigh it out. And the interesting thing is this can be your greatest strength, or actually any of these characteristics. They can be your greatest strength and be your greatest weakness all in the same. So for me, what I have to do is I have to put people on my team that are the T, like my dad. And I have to say, you know what? Am I feeling too much? Am I concerned too much what other people might think? Because sometimes there's a right and a wrong. And I'm not talking about morals here, but I'm talking about there's just sometimes a right way to do something and a more healthier way to do something. And so sometimes I say, is my feeling side coming out so much now that I'm forgetting what I need to see and do because of the logic in this? Now it can be the opposite. Those of you that are thinkers, you may not have that feeling side. You need to get feelers on your team. Because there are times where you're going to hurt feelings and you won't even know that you've done it. You will make decisions and you'll think they're the most logical, best decisions. And you'll be proud of that decision because you know it's the best for the church or it's best for the ministry or whatever you're talking about. But I'm just going to tell you right now, you're going to step all over some people. And you're going to need some feelers to say, hey, wait a minute. Let's hold up just a minute. And I have found that feelers tend to bring people along with them as they make decisions. Thinkers make the decisions and lead. Does that make sense? There's a difference there. So just a summary, thinking and feeling. Let's see in here. How many are T's? How many are T's? All right. How many are F's? Feelers. Look at that. Would you believe most pastors are feelers? If you look at the traits, most pastors are feelers. Anyway, all right. The summary. This third pair reflects your style of decision making. If you prefer to decide on the basis of objective logic, using an analytic and detached approach, then your preference is thinking. If you prefer to decide using values, example, on the basis of what or who you believe is important, then your preferences is for feeling. Let's look at this last area, structure. Structure. In dealing with the outer world, do you prefer to get things decided? Or do you prefer to stay open to new information and options? This is called judging or perceiving. Those who prefer judging like to live in a planned, orderly way, wanting to regulate life and control it. They want to make decisions, come to closure, and then carry on. They like to be structured and organized and want things settled. Now, I'm just going to give you an example here. I've got a slide that's coming in just a moment. It's a video. I want to give you an intro to it first. I'm a J. I'll just be honest with you right up front. I'm a J. These two guys over here that I pointed out earlier, Chris and JJ, they're both P's. I'll just tell you, J's and P's are quite different in many different areas. Hold that next slide because I'm going to skip ahead for a minute just to help to understand P's really quick here. Hold that slide. Don't go yet to it because I think it will go on right away. Those who prefer perceiving like to live in a flexible, spontaneous way, gathering information and keeping options open. They seek to understand life rather than control it. They prefer to stay open to experience, enjoying and trusting their ability to adapt to the moment. So J's are very organized, planned approach. P's are spontaneous, flexible. I'm a J. These two over here are P. But I want to tell you a story about Chris. Chris and I had just started working together, and one day, somehow in the conversation, the wallpaper in our office area came to a discussion. And we discussed whether it was time for a change or not in the office area, whether we needed to paint, take down the wallpaper, or whether we needed to just keep it up a while longer. It was simply a discussion, I'll just tell you that. We talked about if and when maybe possibly we might do it, but it was just a discussion. That's all it was. And so I head off after having the discussion for a funeral, and I had a funeral at Indian Town Gap Cemetery. As you know, that's one of our military places, and a beautiful place, really. And anyway, I was sitting there in the parking lot waiting on the family. And if you know that situation, that scenario, you have, 15, 20 minutes total to have your entire service from start to finish. You have to be ready to go. So I'm waiting on the family. I see them pull up. It's about 5 minutes before the service is to start. So I'm gathering my thoughts. I just went over my notes real quick. And my phone dings. And I turn on my phone and click it, and this is the video that comes up. So this is Chris Shalter, and the guy that's recording is Trevor Gockenauer, who happens to be a J, and he thought this was quite funny. And I'm sitting there in the parking lot, and I'm watching this happening. This is my office, by the way. And I'm sitting there watching it, and I literally look at my phone, and I'm going, no! I had no idea that our brief discussion would turn into this. All right, we're good. We're good. It goes on. But bottom line is a J wants it planned out. They want to know when, where, and how. They're very organized. The example we used in the very beginning, the activity, if you notice, the J's, they delegate. They want to know details. They want to know where they're going. They want to know who's doing what. Did you hear the one group? They couldn't decide anything because they wanted to know exactly who was covering what, details. They wanted it completely organized. Where the P group only had 5 minutes, and they had all these crazy ideas of squirt guns and whatever else over here that they came up with, some crazy things. And what's amazing is absolutely P's tend to be more imaginative, where J's tend to be more of the organized plan. This is what we're going to do.
Rocky?
Yes.
I just want to see at the end of the day if anything gets done in that P group over there. All those ideas that they had.
There you go. Right. Exactly. Exactly. So.
All the video, right?
Wait a minute, though. There's the rest of that story that I can tell on Chris. You're right. They are great initiators, but poor finishers. So here's the deal. Really, this is a true story. So Trevor and I, the story, the guy that was videotaping and thought it was funny at the time, later changed his attitude. But he and I, with the other staff, decided, okay, we started this project, we've got to do it. And we're not talking just one office, we're talking the entire office complex. And so we start volunteering our time, our family time, because we all want to take up church time during the work days. And so each evening we're coming in working. And about the second week of doing this, we go, where's Chris? And so we happened to ask him the next day, hey, Chris, can you join us tonight? And he said, oh, no, I've got a date night with my wife tonight. Are you kidding me? We want a date night with our wives. But you can see his P and J, you see? So, yes, you're exactly right. Absolutely. They're great starters. They really are. But not always the best finishers. And so here's the thing. Just like in everything we've talked about, we need people to be balanced, a team to be balanced, okay? So I will say that J's can really frustrate P's, and P's can frustrate J's. Here's why. Not only that example right there, but P's are always wanting to do whatever comes on the top of their mind. Let me give you a great example. JJ doesn't even know I'm going to use this, but JJ's new to our team. He's a P. So we've been doing Ash Wednesday service for the last 6 years. We have a pretty much a set way of doing that. We change it up from year to year and try to make it new and exciting for people. And so here we are, we're planning, we're doing it, and we get into the sanctuary setting it up, and we're going through all of the things and where things are going to go, what we're going to do. And the P over here, JJ, keeps saying, wait a minute, why don't we do it this way? Have you thought about doing it this way? And I'm thinking in my head, okay, you're new on the scene, you're the newest staff, you've never been through Ash Wednesday with us, you don't even know what we're doing, and you're giving all these ideas. And I did get frustrated to the point where I was upset, but I was like, I had to stop and think, why is he giving me all these ideas? And I was like, oh wait, he's a P. He's a P. He's spontaneous, he's flexible, he's sharing all these great ideas. And they were great ideas. But at the same time, for a J, it can be very frustrating. Because a J has a planned approach and know where they're going. A J wakes up in the morning and knows what their day is like before they even open their eyes. A P, many times, will wake up and say, what am I going to do today? A great example, too, with a J and a P is, I often ask a marriage couple, a couple that's married, if there's a J and a P, I'll say, so if you would like to plan a vacation and plan where you will go and what you will do, or would you rather just get in the car and drive and go? And depending on where you are on the scale, you fall with one or the other, and sometimes a little bit of each. Some of those slight P's will say, well, I want a little bit of a plan, but I really want to do whatever I want all the time. You know, I want to be able to be flexible and whatever. And the J's, on the other hand, they've got a plan. They know where they're stopping, where they're going. They know the itinerary. They know where they're going to sleep for the night. They got reservations made. They got it all planned out, right? So it's the difference between a J and a P big time. So here's a summary of it all there. Yes? Yeah. It worked very well, Chris. I was on my sabbatical, and Chris handled that for me. He did amazing. Thank you, Chris. Absolutely.
This is the point where we get to tell stories about you, Ron.
Hey, I'm telling stories about me, too.
Discussion time at the end.
We're moving on. Judgment and perception. Summary here. The final pair describes the types of lifestyles you adopt. If you prefer life to be planned and well-structured, then your preference is judging. This is not to be confused with judgmental, which is quite different. If you prefer to go with the flow, to maintain flexibility and respond to things as they arise, then you prefer perception. And a summary of all four: people and things, extrovert; ideas or information, introvert; Facts and reality, sensing. Possibilities and potential, intuition. Logic and truth, thinking. Values and relationship, feeling. A lifestyle that is well structured, judgment. Or one that goes with the flow, perception. Now, at the bottom, the next slide there is a chart. And it, if you took your Myers-Briggs personality inventory, you will be one of these 16 characteristics, this description. One of these 16. I want to just go really quick because I think this is interesting. And if somebody, I don't have a pen up here, Kevin, would you do me a favor? Would you count on each of these? I want to see where we fall in this, the statistics of Myers-Briggs and all that. But if you'll mark each of these 16, I want you to raise your hand when we get to your personality inventory type. If you'll raise your hand what you are, and Kevin's going to, if you'll count each one and tally it. Yes, yeah.
If I'm different at home than I am at work.
That's interesting, yeah.
I mean, I've learned this with the Myers-Briggs over the years.
Yeah. And
So very few people believe that I'm an introvert, except Keith.
yeah.
He lives with me.
And that's,
So,
yeah.
So is it possible that you vacillate in those two areas behavior-wise in order to accomplish whatever the job is?
So yes. So here's the thing, and that's a great question. So let's take the extrovert introvert piece there. Okay, the question was, he said that at home he's more an introvert, but with his ministry, his job, he's more an extrovert. And is it normal to kind of do both, or to be both, or do you learn to do both? And so that's a great question. So the answer is really yes. What's interesting is for extroverts or introvert, whatever you are, if you are placed in a position or a ministry, a job, whatever it may be, you are expected to perform a certain way. And so you can actually learn to adapt and adopt those very characteristics. Now, whether you know it or not, your other side, your true side, still may be coming out more than you think it might be. But I will tell you that, yes, you can learn and adapt those things. Yes?
The one part that I really have a problem with all of these is there's, and maybe you're going to give it, but we're Wesleyans. If anybody believes in transformation, we do.
Oh, yeah.
And while this, I read one critique of this, one general critique is with all psychology, the sinful self that we all are is, and certainly Carl Jung was, and the Briggs were, and all this. Yes, and this can show us in a mirror-like way who we were and are, but we don't nurture ourselves into Christ. We can nurture ourselves into a basic knowledge. But what God performs upon us with the Holy Spirit within us can transform.
Absolutely.
And at one point, one comment you made, you said that the feeling that I think was a sensitive, you said, I'm not speaking about morals here, I'm speaking about, and immediately my mind went to, well, yes, we are. We're, throughout all of these things, we're talking about the basic understanding of love. And one of the key pieces that Wesley brought was that Christ transforms us and makes us different in loving. And if there is no transformation of that personality that was before to a new personality now, then what is God transform? So I have a tendency
Sure, and I understand what you're saying.
Hey, Rocky.
Yeah.
There's a couple things that worry me about that. Suggesting that personality types, or any specific personality type would be sinful in nature, is problematic. Or the transformation must happen to follow Christ. That's one. Two, you get nurtured in Christ, which means we grow intentionally and regularly. That's part of the Wesleyan experience. And I mean, I don't always love my answer. Let me get that right. But
Sure.
even if you are not in the ones that are perceiving people or I guess passionate or those things, it does not mean a neglect of love. That's just your base setting. So like this ability for us to flip the switch, for us to grow in personality, but it's not necessarily that this has to change in order to follow Christ.
Sure. Very good.
Or it could change.
It could. It does change over time.
Go ahead.
And a little clarification. I didn't say nurture in Christ, but nurture into Christ. Conversion is not a nurturing into. I just want to, I'm asking a question. What's the impact of Christ coming into the person?
Yeah, and I'll answer that, but go ahead.
I was a carnal INFJ. I am now a sanctified INFJ.
Amen.
And what does that mean?
And there's a world of difference between the two.
Amen.
And I think we need to understand what does that mean.
Yeah.
I just think this feeds into like how you interact with each other, right? Like so,
Right.
if you can't guess, I'm a P.
No, I'm sorry.
I actually scored 100% on the P. I'm as P as you get. But what that meant when I worked with Mark Crew, who's clearly not a P, was that my mentality was I wanted to have recess and then do my homework. And Mark was do your homework and then have recess. So I had to learn. It didn't change who I was, but I had to learn to conform to his leadership. Well, there's things I had to learn to conform to all the time. That's part of growing as a Christian. We learn to conform to things that aren't our nature necessarily.
Sure. Absolutely. And first of all, there's not a good or bad personality. There's not. There's not a good or bad. I hear your question and what you're saying, but I absolutely believe you can be a sanctified, whatever your characteristics are. This personality inventory tells us what we tend to think like, what we tend to be like. It doesn't mean I can't be a feeler and not follow Jesus, or be an extrovert and follow. In fact, I feel like we're talking about two different worlds, to be honest with you. And I think it's one of those. Sometimes we spiritualize things that shouldn't be spiritualized. God gives us a personality. Everybody has one. Period. And so I think it's one of those pieces that I think we ought to just be maybe cautious with that we're not spiritualizing something that shouldn't be. We're all born with personalities, and nurture helps to even develop that. Yeah.
Yeah, and this question, one of the places that you can go for a resource to help work with some of this basic wiring that God gives to us is Jim Fowler's work on faith stage development. Kind of can dovetail with the Myers-Briggs or other evaluation forms.
Sure.
To help understand the transitions that take place in the spiritual formation of an individual personality, whatever the tendency is. And number two is I have sensed or observed a slight shift that can take place towards, let's say, one personality type on this scale moving more to the center and movement within the bracket that we find ourselves, basically a softening or a more rigid posturing, depending on what's going on in a person's life spiritually. So if you're going to overlay what Myers-Briggs is doing, maybe it's good to go to Jim Fowler and let him talk about some of this spiritual faith.
Very good.
Development stuff.
Very good. Thank you, Shirley.
I would just add that every personality temperament, I've done Strength Finders, 101, 201, 301, EQ, all of these personality temperaments in. For me, the benefit has been back to learning myself. Love the Lord your God, with heart, soul, mind, strength, your neighbor as yourself. And the way that I saw myself before knowing Christ is completely different than the way I see myself in Christ. And these tools, and that's how I look at them, tools, help me to find pieces of myself that I can honor as God honors me. And that's what it's done for me. I mean, that's just a personal story for me, of how they affect me.
That's excellent. Thank you. Yeah, yeah.
Can you speak a little bit, Rocky, to the idea of confirmation bias when it comes to these sorts of inventories? You know, I'll be honest with you, I take these with a grain of salt. I think they have some value. But once you get identified as something, then you begin to look for evidence to confirm that is what you are. Like for me on a lot of those, I was 51, 40, 48, like just barely borderline. So it would be hard. At different times I could probably get different results because of what I got there. But is there any sort of study or research on that you start to kind of like what came first, the chicken or the egg? Do I start to live into what this tells me that I am?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I actually brought with me that very thing. The validity of and reliability was given over and over and over again, and they actually have a percentage rate here that I brought with me. It's 0.81%, 81% of accuracy. And that's based on years and years, decades of study of the Myers-Briggs. And so yeah, I hear what you're saying. Nothing's perfect. I'm just going to tell you that. No matter what assessment you're going to use, nothing is perfect. I've had people that I've given a personality inventory to, and they look at me and go, well, that's wrong. Okay, how is it wrong? You know, and we start to talk about it, and again, it depends on how you take the test. As we talked about in the beginning, it may be bad day, good day, what you're feeling like that day, if you're a good test taker, bad test taker, all those factors. In fact, I was talking to Kevin Griffin. He comes from an education standpoint. It's the same concept when you take a bunch of kids or teenagers or college students and you give them an assessment test. Same thing. If they had a bad night the night before, didn't sleep, do you think they're going to do well on that test? It's going to be all skewed. If they took another long test the day before, will that skew the test? A lot of these factors. In fact, schools are now doing a lot of things that have to be put in place preparation-wise before these assessment tests can be even given. Good question.
I don't need to devalue it, just to sort of put it in perspective. I have seen folks who are really into this particular test, like identify themselves and everybody around them using it. And I sometimes wonder, one of the things that I wonder about is all the results are positive. Like everything that the test tells you about yourself is positive.
No, actually, that is incorrect. If you want to do a whole lot more research on Myers-Briggs, there is a huge, huge section on the website, Myers-Briggs, of positive characteristics of your personality and negative characteristics of your personality. Things to work on and improve on, things of how... it even goes into people that would... personality that would kind of clash with you and how you can work with those people. Let me tell you something. There is books and books written on this. So that's not
fair enough,
necessarily true.
but it's that I care about it, and so
Sure.
I dig into it a little bit.
Sure.
And push and see what
Yep.
it's really all about.
Yeah, very good. All right, really quick, let's do the, I want to see if you, let's just go right down through the list here. If you are a EN, we're going to start at the very bottom. ENTJ, we're going to work our way up. ENTJ. If you are ENTJ, raise your hand. You getting this? The very bottom one. On the chart, the very bottom one to the right bottom. ENTJ. The one right next to it, ENFJ. If you're ENFJ. The next one is ESFJ. ESFJ. Anybody that?
Two right here.
Two?
Two right here.
Two, three. Okay. Okay, the next one is ESTJ. ESTJ. Okay, we're going to go block right above it, which is ESTP. One. The next one is ESFP. All right, the next one is ENFP. The next one is ENTP. Okay. Box right above it, INTP. Okay, the next one is INFP. The next one is ISFP. The next one is ISTP. The block right above it is ISTJ. The next one is ISFJ. Next one is INFJ. All right, and the last one, INTJ. All right, so tell us, Kevin, maybe the top three there, if you can.
Top three are ENFJ is first, and then the next two are ESFP is tied with ENFP. They both have 5, and ENTJ, there were 3 that had 5 in it, but the top is ENFJ.
All right, very good, very good. Thank you for doing that. There's some graphs to follow in your packets there. If you pull them up, it's a little hard to see on the black and white copies that you have. So I don't know if that helps you any right there that's colored. But that tells you the different 16 types. This is the norm, average of each of these personality types. Isn't that interesting? This is norm, nationwide, worldwide, whatever. Overall Myers-Briggs. You see where you fall. Okay, go to the next one. The next one is interesting, which is personality types in men. You can see where you fall in that. Not interesting. And the next one is the personality types in women. See where you fall in that as far as statistics of other women. And then the next two are charts that I gave you. They're just kind of silly charts, but they give you a little bit more helpful explanation. The last one, I don't know about you, I'm a Star Wars fan. It actually applies a Star Wars character to who you might be like. And by the way, again, with Myers-Briggs, there's tons of research out there. You can actually find other assessments of other favorite movies or whatever and apply the characters to the Myers-Briggs. It's quite fascinating, all of them. All right, really quick, we're going to do questions very quick, and then I think we're going to take a break. And then we're going to have a panel of a number of guinea pigs that will be placed up here. And then we'll have some questions and some discussion on how this relates to ministry and how we can use it together in ministry. So Yes.
I'd be real interested in hearing from my E friends. For me, the easiest aspect of my job is sermon preparation. Because I'm a heavy I. I get to be in my library. I get to hang out with the great thinkers of the faith. And I would spend most of my time there if life allowed. The hardest part of my day is standing in the back of the sanctuary after the service.
Wow.
I'm wondering if that's all eyes are that way, or if I'm just as weird as everybody says I am. And for my E friends, is it the opposite? Is it painful to have to spend time in sermon preparation, and they love the relational life?
So to answer one of the questions, how many if you're an I introvert, how many of you would say that you side with what he just said? In other words, you feel the same way. You're an introvert and you're feeling the same way as him. Raise your hands real quick. Okay? All right, so who, extrovert, I could share, but let's... Gotcha.
Same process in a way.
Okay. So is there an extrovert that would like to speak on this? I could, but I want to hear from somebody else.
I agree with what he said. As an extrovert, I struggle with the prep, but I'm more relational. So when I get to go out, be at their houses, or I get to stand at the back and hug and high five and have that relational type atmosphere, I thrive. But when it comes to sitting in my office by myself and trying to just think and go through the great theologian stuff that they write, way over my head. I'm just a poor Appalachian redneck from West Virginia. You know, I like it just straight out, easy to understand. But yeah, I'm opposite. I like the relational part of it.
Very good.
Redneck fit in one of these letters.
I don't know. I see two hands.
I think, Mike, the difference in that is like in my sermon prep, like I don't find it overly difficult to prep a sermon, but I probably don't do it to the extent you would. So I'll change my sermon walking through the pulpit. So, you know, it's just.
And that's his P right there coming out. That's the P. That's the P. Jay will stick with the notes. Wayne, I saw a hand back here.
I had this conversation with myself Saturday. Why do I want to go to 3 hospitals instead of sit there and finish my sermon? And I think I'm just the opposite of that.
Yeah.
I was here for the meeting and I got a phone call, and one of my former people was in the hospital, and my thinking was, if I hadn't brought my brother with me, I'd be gone.
Sure.
Because to sit in a room or a meeting for even the studies versus the people.
Sure.
As an extrovert, the people are the business.
Sure. Sure. Yeah.
Same thing with me. I love to be engaged talking to people.
Sure.
And I hardly sit in the office. When you call me and say, so what we can meet right here and discuss what you want us to discuss. And I do my preparation for the sermon. Like the whole year I set everything in order to follow the scripture.
Sure.
Doing a series of teaching in the book of Acts.
Very good. Good.
I think
Couple
going
hands
to
back.
hospitals could complete the sermon.
Right?
I mean, that's just the way that's the preparer or saturator.
Sure. Sure.
You don't have to feel guilty about that. I've learned that the Lord may complete that with some story you're going to run into at the hospital.
Yeah. Back here, I saw two hands.
I actually want to add a little something he said over there about changing your sermon when you walk through the pulpit. There's times where it's just interacting with people before the service has altered my sermon. So the Ian who has been talking to people before the service has changed something that would have happened behind the pulpit that may not have happened if I was.
Are you a P?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Got a question?
I like to think that maybe there's some in this room that there's the balance, they're right in the middle. I'm an extrovert, but I also see the importance of getting your words together, that preparation is so important to go out into the world and be the best extrovert that you can be.
Sure.
So I think that, in my opinion, it's, at least for me, I think I'm right in the middle, and I think there needs to be a balance in it.
Yeah, and again, it's you can strive for whatever areas you would like to improve on, that you certainly believe that the Lord's saying, hey, this would be a trait that you could certainly grow in or whatever, certainly. But here's the interesting thing. I think you've got to realize that for each of us, again, there's that scale. For example, extrovert, introvert. Where do you fall on that scale? If you're an extrovert, doesn't mean you're like a JJ where you're the farthest, highest number you could be. For example, I'm an extrovert, but I'm kind of more towards the middle. And so while I love greeting people and talking with people and it energizes me, that's my dominant trait. But I also need that alone time too. I can't be around people all the time. I'll be completely worn out. So do you see there? So there is that balance that, and you've got to know your personality and what you need. I'm gonna go ahead and end this because I know we need to take a break and then come back together. I do want to say publicly, I love my staff, and I have to go home with these guys and work with them. Hey, now don't help me here. Help me. No, I honestly, I promise, I have the best staff you could ever have in any church. I love them dearly. I only use them because I love them. And I actually did ask their permission ahead of time. They knew it was coming. They didn't know all that was coming. But anyway. All right. Well, Dave?
All right, we appreciate Rocky going and the delivery. Fantastic. We probably ought to thank John for the meal from Wawa today. So let's take a 15-minute break. All right, that's a big break, but let's take a 15-minute break. And you've been sitting for a while, then we'll gather back about 11 o'clock and we'll go ahead and have some more discussions. So let's do that. Great, thanks. Contest. But anyhow, we'll make our way around noon out there to the cafe. I'll be at the entryway. If you push the yes, I'm staying, there's going to be a little bit of a buffet out there. It's a $10 cost for that buffet. If you decide, hey, I just want to order from the menu, you can. So there's a menu and you can go to the counter and make an order. You wouldn't give me $10. You just go to the register and order whatever it is you wanted. So, but there is going to be the $10 there for the buffet meal. So, all right. And
also, let me give the number for today in case you're putting your learning code down and you came in late. It is 4 possible hours. The number today for the PCDC is 16060. 16060. And there'll be 2 or 3 that'll call Melanie tomorrow and ask her what it is. And I already sent it to her. So if you forgot it and you can't figure out how to make it happen, you can text me or you can call the district office.
Great. Okay, so we're going to have a little bit of a dialogue which involves all of us. And Kevin's going to lead it. We just asked 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 of us to be up here to respond to those questions if they're directed towards us. But Kevin is going to lead this. What we hope is that it's going to talk a little bit about Myers-Briggs, but actually Kevin is completely in charge. So whatever you want to do, just ask Kevin. If he says yes, that's okay. If he says no, I guess it's not okay. But Kevin is completely in charge. So, Kevin?
Which I found out last night at 9:20. So, crafting.
Well, you're a high P,
better,
so I figured that would be fine.
Actually, the J in me, the first question I asked was, what are the parameters here? Like, how long do these guys have? Because one of these guys, who I know and love dearly, may take longer than other people. Just kidding.
Yeah,
I'll say
Dave.
it all with love.
You know, we're creating separation here.
Yeah. So anybody who watches sports knows that any good official is the one that you never notice. So that's going to be my goal here. I'm going to ask some questions, but you're going to ask questions, and hopefully we'll get something out of this. The first question that I was given to ask was, you guys, all of you, would you share, we'll start with Carrie, what is your score, your Myers-Briggs score?
INFP.
ENTJ. What was that?
Rocky is ENFP.
Rocky is an ENFP.
ENFP.
That way you guys can pass the other.
INFP.
Sorry, technical difficulties here.
ENTJ.
So this question wasn't on the list, but I thought it'd be good, and maybe this is more because you guys don't know Carrie as well, but what are 2 or 3 markers, characteristics that you would say about your ministry from your church? You're free to answer. What are 2 or 3 or 4 things that you would say that are markers, that are characteristics from your ministry at your church?
Oh, I don't know. You tell me.
You're in charge.
Yeah, I see that. So one would be men's ministry.
Yes.
Another would be giving.
Generosity, yes.
Another would be prayer.
Yes.
This is supposed to be for you.
I mean,
The prayer of Jesus that we have unity.
yes.
You may feel free to expound on any of those.
Well, sometimes you think the markers are the markers, and they're not. So he's 13 years where I was, so I wanted to see if I agreed. He started with men's ministry. I just wrote an article for Grace and Peace. It should come out. I don't know if it's the next issue or how far ahead they are, but I wrote about how God showed me after 10 years that our men's ministry was probably the practical secret to the growth of the church. Not for every church, but it had been for ours. So I won't say any more about that. You'll get to read the article. Generosity, one of the things that frustrates me, are pastors who make apologies for receiving offerings. It just drives me crazy. You say things like, now, if you don't want to give, don't. And if you're here for the first time, don't dare get your wallet out. And those kind of things just drive me crazy. If people want to give, let them. Don't talk them out of it. You know, you'll find that out when you need some money. But so I just said I used to say in membership when we received members in front of the church, if you don't plan on at least eventually being generous, you're going to be miserable in this church. I said, now, if you're stingy now, that's okay. Keep coming. If you would like to eventually be generous, hang around. Because it was the most generous church I had ever been a part of. And people thanked me for it later. Maybe some left, I don't know. But it was true that it was a generous church. And we had our vision was not in a statement, it was in a word. We had a vision word, it was unity. And vision is something that you don't ever quite get it 100%, but it's your focal point. So some people will come to me and say, Pastor, I don't think we've achieved full unity yet. I said, you pay attention, do you? But it still is the vision because Jesus prayed, in John 17 that we would be one. And so we made that our vision, not to be confused with our mission or our strategy, but the vision was one word. And you said one other thing.
Prayer.
Yeah, prayer, because mainly I need people to hold me responsible in the areas of prayer. I need accountability. So the men's ministry, I had a men's prayer, and the ladies had prayer also on Thursday mornings. But because I knew I was meeting Thursday mornings at 6 o'clock with anywhere from 15 to 45 men, just according to who showed up that particular Thursday, I knew I was going to have at least one full prayer session a week in my ministry. So prayer was a very essential part, and it's essential here. Like you'll find that out at our district assembly this year. There will be one whole hour of sacred assembly of praying at the district assembly, because I think we couldn't assemble for a greater reason than to pray together. So when I heard about the prayer retreat here, that's been the sweetest spot I've been yet on this district, was at the prayer retreat. I believe God is honored by that, and we're changed in that environment. So of course prayer, yeah.
So I could give you our, Celebrate, Connect, Care. Worship is pretty key to us, and we put a lot of emphasis on worship and what happens during that time. And then the whole idea of connection, which is relationship. In the life of our church, we have over 800 adults that are involved in connect groups that are meeting on a regular basis, and that's a high emphasis for us. And so we push that a lot as a next step. Get in the group, get connected. Also, we're huge on pastoral care, which sounds funny because most people think large churches don't do pastoral care. But we are huge on pastoral care. We have a system in place that does all of that, that helps us accomplish that. But our pastors take care of their people, and we have different types of calls they make, how many they make a week, how those calls are triggered, and we have a system in place that does that, that helps that take place. At the beginning of the time here, I mentioned how in my first church I'd go home and write down everybody that wasn't there, that I'd call them that week. Well, that's how I did pastoral care then. That isn't how we can do pastoral care now. So everybody in our database, which is about 2,400 adults that are regular attenders, and we call that once a month, they are all assigned to a pastor, and we have a grid that comes out every week. If they miss 3 times, they're contacted. If they miss 6 times, they're contacted. If they miss 9 times, they're contacted. If they miss 13 times, the contact becomes, a letter and so forth and so on about, hey, so that is very important to us. Pastoral care is very important to us when somebody goes into the hospital. We are and the main reason is because, this is a statement that we've all heard years ago. People don't care what you know until they know that you care. So it's foundational that people know you care, because if you don't care, you have no voice with them. And so it's essential for us that we do that. And so we do that at a heavy rate. And also, they say you can only grow to the level of your ability to care for people. And the moment you can't care any longer is the cap of your growth. So it's important for us that our pastors are engaged, as well as the pastoral care that's going on in group life. So we have lay people that do it, but the pastors are heavily invested in what they call their PP list, which is their pastoral care list. And so and then care, ministry and service involvement. So.
I had known Dave for about 10 years, and our church was getting to the place where we didn't know, could we continue pastoral care? And I heard Dave talk about his church, and we didn't give up. We took their model and adapted it to our local church. And maybe, Dave, at some Pcdc, you could share that model. Because if a church this size can still do pastoral care, certainly a church of any size can. But they do have a way that it works, and it's authentic, and it's got good follow-up ways, and it's not overwhelming. I think you said your staff, the pastors, they can do their care in about an hour and a half or 2 hours a week or something.
Mm-hmm. Outside of the hospital calls,
yeah.
They can do all the other care required within a 2-hour time period.
That's good.
So obviously, I'm no longer in a local church pastoral ministry, but I think there's some things that I'm doing now that I was doing then, or at least, mindset that overlap. So relationship building and being relational is absolutely key to what I'm doing now, and that was a strong orientation in Burlington when I was pastoring there. I think personally, and I know this to be true, that there is a tremendous amount of overlap between the vision that God gave me when I was in Burlington and what I'm actually involved in now, which is based on the first few verses of Isaiah 61, rebuilding the broken walls of the city. As people are healed, then they become healers. And that's something that was important to me as a local church pastor, and that's something that's important now, and certainly in the context of ESL, and certainly in a city ministry, that's critically important. So that there is a tie-in to spiritual and emotional health, which we spent a lot of time on during my tenure at Burlington, because the intent was that the healers, the healed become the healers, not just in the local church context, but in the areas outside of the church where ministry can at times and many times be messy. And I'm a big proponent of the church has to take risks. The church has to step into uncomfortable environments, which means the people of the church have to be willing to become uncomfortable, because ministry to the unsaved can be very messy. And if we're not willing to get mess on ourselves, then we're not doing what Christ has called us to do. Focus on the word, not just content, but context, and doing deep dives. God's word is so important to me. It has from the time I was first saved 40 years ago. It is still the same now. And I want people to have an understanding and appreciation of God's word, and invested a ton of time in preaching and in teaching. And as I have opportunity, even now don't have as much opportunity in my current role, but that's still something that's critically important to me. So I think I'm gonna stop there because I'm an I, and I already feel like I've talked too much.
I think this is working now. For me and our church, I do believe that worship is certainly primary and is a huge focus that we spend a lot of time planning and preparing, and certainly wanting absolutely what God wants in that worship time. But I would also say a big area for us is ministries that do outreach to our community. We have a lot, and I praise the Lord for that. Many of them were started even before I got there under my dad, but we have a nursing home that reaches those individuals that can't afford nursing home care, and it's an incredible ministry. We have 2 daycare centers, and we are constantly doing everything we can to not just have child care, but what can we do to develop a relationship with those families and pull them into the church. It was very exciting. Kevin, I think, shared this, or somebody on our greeting team just the other day shared, we have right now more daycare families attending our church at the Ephrata campus than we have had in years. And yet all the craziness that our daycare has been through, you would think it would be the opposite. But God has been blessing, and so we praise the Lord for that. But we also have a refuge ministry. It's a drug and alcohol addiction ministry. We actually are getting ready to hire staff for that. It's an incredible opportunity that we have in downtown Ephrata. Huge drug problem in that area, and so we're able to get in there and do some help. We have a Celebrate Recovery ministry. We have an Upward ministry. I could go on and on, but we've just had a wonderful opportunity to get our hands deep into the community, and that's our continual hope and dream. We have 2 campuses that we do services at. Jim Lucas right here does one of those. We have a Mount Hope campus, which is the nursing home. We do services there. We actually are getting ready to plan a Hispanic service and another campus launch. So there's just some amazing things that I believe God's helped us to do to be able to connect and get into our community.
You can answer this however you want, nuts and bolts, just maybe even beyond that. But Dave, we'll start with you. Everybody who studied leadership says that the hardest person to lead is yourself. What are some basic things you do to lead yourself first?
So I tend to be very structured in the sense of the way I spend my days. So my days are, I know what I do on Monday, I know what I do on Tuesday, I know what I do on Wednesday. Thursday is my more open day, a flexible day. So what I find is I'm such a high E that if I'm in my office and there's any conversation going on outside, I have to be involved in it. And then that really messes me up. So I purposely schedule myself away from people, not because that's what I like, but because that's the only time I could do sermon prep. Mike talked about sermon prep, and I said, sermon prep is almost feels like a punishment to me because I'm there doing this thing, and I'm waiting to get with other people. So, but anyhow, I have to seclude myself. And so that's one of those things in self-leadership to accomplish what I'm after is I have to put my schedule down, and then I'm a high enough J that I have to follow my schedule. So my E and my J kind of collide there to, bring me to what I need to do. But that's one of the things. But the routine of, when I'm reading the Word, when I'm spending time with the Lord, when I prepare my sermon, I prepare at the same time every week. You know what I mean? And in the same hours. And so my meetings are all the same time every week. So I don't know if that's helpful. But
Byron.
Well, actually, I'm kind of in a state of flux right now because, and I've shared with a couple of folks over the last few weeks, my whole rhythm has changed because I had a very set routine when I was pastoring in Burlington, and that has just changed dramatically in large measure because the people that I need to meet with tend to be available on weekends, Saturdays, more so even Sundays, and in the evening. So, I spend a lot of my weekends doing things that I would previously have done during the middle of the week, and I'm still trying to adjust to that and figure out what is the right rhythm for me. That said, my days, consistent with who I am, I try to devote consistently a lot of time in prayer. That's critically important for me. I'm very contemplative or contemplative, depending on your preference of how that word is pronounced. And so I need a lot of time, spend a lot of time listening to what the Holy Spirit has to say to me and just being still. I spend time in my word. And those things, I would put that, Kevin, at the top, absolute top of the list in terms of how I lead myself or how I allow myself to be led. I also try to listen to other voices, people who I have a tremendous amount of respect for, and try to spend time with them as time permits, and try to do that on a fairly regularly scheduled basis so that I'm hearing from other people and have them not just speak into my own life, but also just hear what's going on in their life and have an opportunity to just kind of connect with them at a personal level. And I find that I learn a lot personally, not just about them, but I learn a lot about myself as a result of spending time with them. So those things are just very important to me. And there was one other thing I was going to share, and it's just kind of drifted off. So I'll pass the mic proverbially.
Sure. So probably the two areas that, and I've already mentioned when I shared earlier, that I struggle with pastoring myself, I guess, so to say, would be the first of all, the details area. I'm such a big picture person. Always looking at where we need to go, what we need to do, and I don't always remember the fine-tuned details. The second area would be the feeling side. I'm a strong feeler, so that means sometimes people can get in the way of making the best decisions. And so I have found that I need to, I do a lot of asking before a big decision's made, especially if it involves people and the church. And I'll say, am I overthinking this too much for the people side? Help me to understand it. Am I looking at this more of a logical perspective, and where's the balance? So those would be the two areas.
You want me to go now? I thought I'd write a few things down so I'll have them for later. I want to get this down because it's important to me. And the weakest think is better than the greatest memory. For me, I think that maybe these personality traits is what I see Myers-Briggs as. I was telling Pastor Rocky in the break what the Myers-Briggs test has done for me, or the results, is, when you first hear yourself on a recording, you say, I don't sound like that. And everybody else says, oh, yes, you do. Well, that's kind of what I believe these results are for me. I come out of denial and say, yeah, that's kind of where I need to have some attention. And you get the things that you're good at, but I think getting the things that you struggle with are equally important. Actually, I think Myers-Briggs saved our marriage, honestly. After about 10 years of trying to make each other like each other, we found out that we really were fearfully and wonderfully made. And we argue with each other that, Kim would say, I'm more fearful, she's more wonderful. And I would probably agree now, but not 10 years ago. That whole idea, whatever attracts, attacks, is that what you said? So I'm grateful. They are tools. I think Pastor Shirley said these are tools. And they've really helped me. So they also have told me a little bit about how God has used me in my ministry. I think with some of the places I score, longevity makes a lot more sense, for somebody like me. Maybe not for you. And so the thing that I value maybe more than anything is longevity is the greatest convincer. The sense is my life will be my argument. My life lived over the long haul. So I love to stay in the conversation. I used to always want to be right, I got over that. Now I just want to be righteous. I want to be in right relationship with people, and I want to stay in the conversation. So that also kind of links to longevity. I embrace longevity because I've lived long enough now to know that it works for me. It may not work for everyone. So I can't talk about, how I teach myself without always remembering this, that if you're in the conversation, this is not over. Tomorrow you could have victory there, especially in raising our children through the teenage years and the college years. I learned this probably best there, where I just wanted to stay in the conversation with my kids. The other thing is I believe that relationships rule. I really do. So if you go to a board meeting and you get a 10-9 vote for what you wanted, and you come out and say I won, I would doubt that you really won. How are the 9 people who voted against what you wanted, how are they doing now? So this is the way it worked itself out practically in a board meeting. When I first went there, I wanted to change the name of the church. I didn't pray about it. I just thought that's what we ought to do. Because the church had a pretty bad name in the community, and people had told me that. And so I thought, well, let's change our name. That'll be helpful. So I went to the board meeting. We had a 12-0 vote yes to change the name. And 30 days later, I had to come back under conviction and ask if we could reverse that. We had a 12-0 vote not to change it. Because during the 30 days, the Lord said, oh, aren't you going to stay here long enough to renew the reputation of my name? And you're going to improve on my name, are you? Nazarene. That was the kind of things the Lord said to me. And you can name your church whatever. I'm just saying for me, it was something that built into the saturation and built into the relationship. The vote was important. But there was another vote. I remember one night we voted a certain thing that involved a person, but it was the right vote. You know, we needed to do what we needed to do, but when we got done voting, one lady in the board meeting started weeping. And I asked her, Greta, why are you weeping? And she told us why. She was worried about the person that we had made this decision that was concerning them. So we all decided to take 30 days and pray about it and just to pull the vote back. And you know that 17 days into the 30 days of praying, the issue resolved itself without us having to take any action. So that's what I mean by relationship. One night we were voting on something, and Bill Troyer, we did a yes-no vote. I was so sure it was going to be yes that we just did it verbal. And I said, all in favor, yes. This loud yes, all in favor. This one no. And it happened to be Bill Troyer. And I said, Bill, would you mind explaining to us why you voted no? And when he gave the full reason, we turned the vote around. And we voted unanimously not to do what we voted to do. So I'm just saying, you got to have examples. If you say relationships rule, let's hear, maybe we missed something. You know, this really is about people. That's kind of, I guess my personality sort of makes me this way. I'm much more of an invitation more than an intimidation guy. I like to invite people to come along. I don't like to guilt people because I grew up legalistic and I had a lot of guilt. And I got to hear Pastor Bill Clay preach yesterday, and I think he might have been raised just a little bit like I was. I was feeling you, brother. But the sense is that I've learned that invitation works better than intimidation if you're into longevity and you're willing to stay in the conversation, that is. So I wanted to say that. And finally, when it comes to preparation, I've been all over the place, you know, for preparing messages. I think that's part of teaching yourself when you're preparing the message. Stephen Manley says that the preacher works over that sacrifice and bleeds all week, and then you come to the pulpit and you bleed onto the people. So I think that when we're preparing the message, we prepare as a priest, you know, preparing. I love the definition of priest. We don't use it a lot in our particular venues, but I love it because I heard Neil Wiseman once explain to us in pastoral class what priest meant. He said the priestly function is taking the hand of God and taking the hand of people and bringing them together. And I can never get over that. And I didn't even know what a priest was till I was 20. We didn't have Catholics or where I lived. We were just sort of, you know, on an island. But I love the term priest now. And so when I come to prepare a message, for me, it's more about saturation than preparation. And this probably has something to do with my Myers-Briggs, you know, effects. And I could relate with Jay when he said he changes on the way to the pulpit. I have done that, but it comes out of the saturation that I've done during the week. It rarely comes because I just changed my mind and I'm going to do this. Now, God sometimes changes my mind, and you know when that is. So I think that we haven't, when we're teaching ourselves, we've made it so much about preparation, we've missed saturation. And I think that shows in the pulpit. You know, when we're sharing what we're sharing, if it's not first affected us, then it becomes not real to people. So I have to teach myself. It's not just to prepare a message because I got to preach to these people on Sunday. I've got to deal with this stuff before I preach it. And sometimes I thought I'd be ready to preach Sunday, and the Lord said, I think you need another week on that one, don't you? Yeah, it won't be very believable probably if I preach it today. So all of that has to do with, and then of course all of that, if you put all of that in 3 words, is presence matters most. Sorry, I didn't mean to talk so long, but you prophesied that.
Yeah, it's hard to tell your boss to stop, right? Just kidding. I know. You guys have been in ministry for a while. No offense to your age. That's not what I'm trying to say, but you have a lot of experience. If you could, for you, it was 1994, so that was 24 years in the same church. if you could go back and whisper in the ear to your own self, what are some things that you would say to yourself? And after this question, then I'm going to open it up and let you guys ask questions. What are some things that you would say to yourself about specifically to ministry?
You want me to start?
Sure.
Carrie, exhale. It's not that much about you. I mean, it is. You understand what I'm saying? Nobody's talking, so I'll talk. I'm quoting Stephen Manley a lot today. He must be praying for me. I did learn a lot from Stephen Manley. He's the first one to introduce me to presence with the book by Brother Lawrence, The Practice of the Presence of God. But he said one time, I heard someone, something great had happened kind of through their life in the church, and he was complimenting them, and they said, well, it's not me, it's God. And he said, be careful. He said, Jesus is the king, but Jesus plus you equals the kingdom. That helped me a lot. But what I mean by don't take it, I took a lot of things really personal too long in ministry. And I should have learned earlier, these are about Jesus. These things are about Jesus. You know, I remember the day that I quit being so defensive. I remember at my desk praying about it. It was this sense that I felt like I always had to explain myself to people who didn't get me. You know? And I overdid that. I tried to get someone to understand you who just doesn't and probably won't. And so I was praying about that because I used to say my second favorite thing in heaven will be no misunderstanding. And it still may be my second favorite thing. However, Oswald Chambers said that when someone cannot understand you completely, rejoice. Because whoever understands you completely is your God. And that set me free. And that's where I came up with the line, my life will be my argument. And I've ended a lot of discussions right there.
I'll go with this one. Yeah, I don't know who said this, so it's a borrowed quote. That the truth will set you free, but first it must make you miserable. I wish when God had called me 17 years ago out of that corporate world that, which I thought in many respects was miserable, that I wish I had known about some of the misery I would have to confront, particularly about myself, and how freedom did come, but that the path through misery had to come first. And so I think that certainly would be a conversation that I would have had with myself in the beginning and subsequently, as many times as necessary. I think the second thing, and this is not something that as much that I would tell myself, because it was somebody who actually in this room who shared with me. I had lunch with them shortly, sometime within months of acknowledging the call to myself. And what they told me was about being a pastor was that sometimes you have to be willing to be misunderstood. And I've never forgotten that. And that's helped me, because there's times when, as a pastor, I've had to say things or do things, stances that I've had to take that weren't fully understood by others, but I knew in my heart was the right thing to do for the sake of the kingdom. And so while it was somebody else's comment to me early in my ministry, it was extremely, extremely useful.
So I think I would say, I think, this is going to sound odd maybe, I think I would say God's got this. I've always been by nature a risk taker, and I've always been somebody who is always wanting to push the limits and do the next big thing, and so so a lot of times when you are a risk taker and you put yourself out there with big thoughts, there are people that appreciate that, people that don't appreciate that. You know, there are people that are drawn to vision. And I've always said this: vision is the great uniter, and it's the great divider. The clearer you become in your vision in your local church, the more dedicated people will become, and the more it will shake the fruit off the tree. You know, and so several times in my ministry and having the next step out there and taking the risk, I could say I put our church, I don't want to say in vulnerable places, but in places where we had to really see something happen to succeed, you know. And so a lot of times it would create a lot of nervousness in me to go, oh no, but then every time, no matter what happened, and that is whether the biggest giver left the church or whether whatever took place, God always supplied, you know. And there were some times in which we were doing things, you know, here or someplace else, that I would come home and I would look at my wife and say, I don't know how we're going to make it. I just had this conversation with these people that's upset about where we're going and or what it is that the next big step is, and I don't know what's going to happen. And I would have a lot of nerves and a lot of nervousness and God always provided way beyond what the need was. No matter what individuals, you know, in our ministry said, well, I'm out of here, or I'm not staying, or I'm leaving. And I mean, almost everything you do, right, can create an environment like that. And so I think I'd say to myself over the years is that, you know, God's got this. He always has had it. You know what I mean? And so in that risk taking, I think as long as it is, and Terry mentioned, saturated with what it is we believe God wants us to do, then God comes through in those times. So.
For me, I think I would certainly tell myself balance. Balance of ministry, family, time to relax, all of that. I wish I would have had Mark Prue's message, 2 PCDCs that he did. I wish I'd have had that 20 years ago. Incredible material that he shared with us. And obviously, you know this as a pastor, but people are very demanding, and they want your attention now, not 10 minutes from now. And in a world and day and time when now technology says I can get a hold of you anytime I want, anywhere you are, no matter what you're doing, people expect anything and everything all the time, whether it be a text, an email, a phone call. And I think we live in a day and time when we struggle, those of us that are the Fs, the feelers, struggle with drawing the line. When do I turn this off? When do I stop? And so I know that it can be very tiring, and I'm learning to say no better rather than yes all the time. So those are probably 2 things.
We're done at 12, Dave, is that right?
Right.
So we need to let you guys ask questions in a room full of theologians. Fire away. Mike, go ahead.
We've all learned that we are to build on our strengths and try to minimize our non-strengths. We've learned that well. How have you learned in leadership, in a spiritual community, how to minimize your non-strengths for the blessing of the church?
Don't be intimidated by people who are better than you. Bring them in, make them your friend, and let them take the things and give them true authority to do them. That's been what I had to learn from day one.
So I was never intimidated by good people. I was inspired by them. And I knew that I know my weaknesses, and so does everybody else, even though I might not admit them. I can do administration. You just don't want to be around me after a while I'm doing it. I feel like that's not, now don't hear what I'm not saying. I think administration is as important or more important than anything else we do. But the Lord just didn't wire me that's not my passion. But some people it is. And I have honored those people maybe more than anyone else around me because I can't do what I was wired to do if they won't do what they're wired to do alongside me. So now this is for laity and hired staff. There are a lot of laity just wishing the pastor would ask for help. And I always say, where there is no vision, the people perish, and where there is no vision, the people find another parish. And I think where vision begins is seeing who you have and making sure you get them in place. Now, I failed at it, some. I haven't done it perfectly. But my son, when he was 16, he went to NYC, and we had some measure of, growth that we couldn't explain. And so people kept asking my son that found out he was Carrie's son, tell us what's your dad's secret. He said he knows how to get good people around him. Even at 16, he knew my weaknesses. And he wondered probably how is dad going to do that part of this job. And then he saw I didn't do that part of the job. I found someone else. So early on, like the finances, for example, we had a CPA that attended our church, and nobody had asked him to just take over the finances. And boy, he did. And he's one of my best friends ever because he saw it as I valued that for ministry. And so he pretty much gave himself to the church. He was on my payroll for a while. But even before and after that, Bill Troyer was the secret to helping us achieve what we achieved by helping us be accountable and talk about, I can raise finances and I can usually read a ledger and that kind of thing, but I needed somebody who understood how to give good integrity to finances and things like that. I think, I know I'm off on a little bit of a limb here, but I think some people don't give more to the church because they're not sure what's happening to the money. That can be possible. But with Bill Troyer in place, and occasionally I'd have him just receive the offering. People had confidence that we were watching carefully and prayerfully the vision of the church. That's just one example. But those people that are really good, they don't want your job usually. If they do, don't hire them. Something's wrong with them. But the people that have really good talent, I think that we have a responsibility as stewards to engage them in the church. And of course, people we hire, if you just hire people who are like you and agree with you on everything, well, you just should not hire. You got to have somebody that thinks different than you but has the same values. That's what I'm saying.
I would say I've always been open to evaluation. So even in my first church, I would put out an evaluation. Like for instance, I'd give 8 people in the congregation. I'd say, listen to my messages over the next month, evaluate them, and get these forms back to me. And I practice that all the time, just voluntary evaluation. I think most of my staff would say if they had a serious evaluation point, and we do set ourselves up for times like this. We just had a retreat last week, so we did the 5 voices thing. And then we take a time and say, okay, let's do an evaluation. Okay, tell me what's good, what's bad. And they are pretty open to tell me what's good, what's bad. And so I think not being worked up about those things and being able to hear the evaluation that other people have to give you is a helpful thing. We do that with the board also. Every board meeting we have a time at the end of the board meeting. Okay, tell me what's good, what's bad. Where am I okay? Where am I not okay? How is it? How am I perceived? Is that all right? Is that not? Is there something that needs to shift? And I think that constant open dialogue has also kept normal pastoral attack, maybe, when people would normally come after you because you're so available to that evaluation, that it's helped with that. So I've not always agreed with the evaluation, but I've always kept my mouth shut when it was delivered. So, but then I try to write seriously say, okay, how does this work? So.
Let's, for the sake of time, give another question.
I believe that we can have strongholds within our personality, whether it be our strength or our weakness. Did any of you experience that, and how did you do it?
Well, I don't know that I would classify this as a stronghold. It may have been, but I was forced to confront the fact that I was a control freak, and didn't realize I actually had somebody in the congregation say that to me, and I resisted it for a period of time. And then I finally reached the point where I confessed to the congregation that I'm a recovering control freak, because I want everything to be a certain way. I want it to be. And so while I still had the issue, I felt it was freeing to me to acknowledge it publicly, and then ask for help. Now, I also had the benefit in this, not to drag the first question back in, but I had the benefit of having an office assistant who I gave permission. I trusted her implicitly, and I told her when I assumed the senior pastor role that I could be managed. And I said that to her in those words. I said, I can be managed, so the door is open. If you have something to say about what's going on in the church, or you have something to say that you think I need to hear, my expectation is that you'll come in. And there over the course of several years, there were several conversations that she says, we need to talk about this. And she was a strong person, a forthright person, and I greatly appreciated that. So while those areas might not have been strongholds, that actually might have prevented a stronghold from developing.
To answer that question, yes, you can use your strongholds and learn to adapt. As I shared earlier today, develop teams, whether it be your staff, your board member, what Pastor Carey said earlier. You bring people around you that can help you with your weaknesses, with those things that you struggle with. But the areas that you are strong in, you need to use those areas and use them as a gift that God has given to you. It's interesting. By the way, in your packet that I gave you an article. It was off the web. And it's an article of how to use each and every personality with your staff, with your team. I encourage you to look those up. But just an example, I happened to look up a particular personality that was on our staff, and I just happened to be reading through that, and I realized I had missed a key piece in that individual that I had forgotten. And I realized why there's sometimes adverse reactions from that staff, because I realized I wasn't helping them by not understanding them and what they need. And so yes, you can use you can allow it to be good in your life, your personality, and the things that you're weak in, put people around you that can make up those weak links.
A lot of times we talk about these personalities and talk about people in terms of their strength, and especially where larger churches are dealing with staff, and so you've got people's strengths and weaknesses. Smaller church, we're dealing with volunteers. So whenever somebody wants to do something, they bring with them a character of strength, and it's
Well, when I went to Harrisonburg, I don't know what small is. It's just a word, I guess. We had 120 people. Most of them didn't like each other. They were very talented people, though. I learned quickly that they had potential. What I started out early doing was not having one set of expectations for volunteers and one set for paid staff. If you're going to work in the church, in ministry, actually I expected a little more from volunteers, because the volunteer mentality is, I'm not exactly addressing, but I'll come to it, is like, well, I can just give what I'm given because I'm not getting paid, so they should just be thankful. You know, that kind of person can really mess you up in ministry. So the book I wrote on relational leadership has 13 chapters. Those are the 13 realistic expectations that I have of anyone who leads anything in the church, volunteer or paid. So that helps, first of all, to give them a target. They know what's expected. The other thing is, instead of you helping that person with their weakness, pair them with another lay person if you can, to work together as a team. That way you keep yourself out of fixing everything. But I think that can, now you may not have enough people sometimes, but look there first. Is there, so many times when I had volunteers leading ministry areas, I asked for 2 people, because I looked at those things in advance. I knew this person had a weakness in that area perhaps. Maybe they were better at this. And so I would bring them in together and I would explain to them why I'm asking you both to lead this. And usually it was a Jonathan David kind of a thing. It was they were glad and they understood why. And usually they admitted that, yeah, you know, so I don't know if that helps at all, but that was the first thing that came to mind. Don't give them a different set of expectations, and then see if there's someone else other than the pastor. Here's what will happen. If you as the pastor always do the ministry, no one else will ever do it. Because chances are you 10 talent ones like Peter, you can do it better than everybody, everything in the church. So you've got to lower your expectation a little, but it'll rise over time. I think they will meet it. It might take a little longer, but they will meet it. And I learned this about myself. I mean, I'm not going to say I'm 10 talent, but I can do a lot of things and do them well. And so there was sometimes I would just cringe, you know, wondering, is this really going to happen the way that I hope it will happen? Didn't always. Sometimes I stayed awake at night wondering why I asked that person to do that. But I understand what you're saying. That's the shepherd in you too that wants them to succeed. Because if they fail in ministry, they may not do anything else. So it's a good place, a tension that you're in. I don't think it's a bad place.
I'd like to speak to that real briefly. And I think there's, unfortunately, there are limited things you can do outside of discipling, shepherding, you know, whatever terminology you prefer, and picking 1 or 2 people that you really kind of invest in and move them along so that you can go to the next person. But one of the things I really tried to focus on, particularly in the last few years of my ministry, my pastoral ministry, was to try to help people transition from the mindset of volunteer to the mindset of servant, and define the difference and challenge people to really think about what they really were. Were they volunteers or were they servants? Because the mindset that each of us brings to the table with respect to either of those things may have a bearing on their willingness to receive feedback, coaching, etc.
Also, when I hired staff, I'll come, Tom. When I hired staff, I tried not to just hire evil Knievels. You know what I mean? The best motorcycle rider out there, the greatest performer. I tried to hire infrastructure builders, people that knew how to do what they did, but they knew how to include laity to get their job done. Joseph Stoner, my worship pastor, 23 years. He is not the greatest soloist in the world. He's not. But he understands music. He understands all music. He can play multiple instruments, and he knows how to get the right people up front. You know, he knew how. So I think that when you're hiring people, a lot of times we look for the person, you know, who is the most dynamic, and sometimes that person will cut down ministry in your church because no one else wants to do anything. They're so wonderful, you know. I'm not saying I'm all for wonderful people,
But that works a little bit better in a larger church, you know, when you got more people dealing with it. But infrastructure builders are so important. So whenever I hired, I made sure, how are you going to include other people in your ministry? And I wanted to hear them talk about that. Tom, you've been raising your hand. Yeah.
Yeah, it strikes me, and it's kind of this is a question in how you use this, that we could maybe kind of do it unconsciously to a certain extent as being Wesleyan. But what we, Myers-Briggs is kind of a reasoned way to approach this. All of us speak to our experience, and then we have things that come behind us in our not only the church traditions but the cultural traditions of being Americans oftentimes. And we want to have not only scriptural but the living word impacting us. And in speaking to this, and maybe you all could speak to how these local Wesleyan speaks to it as well, but it really comes down to that. Yeah, we sometimes put a person beside that has a difference. Sometimes we're praying intensely that somebody changes because we have no other person to put beside. Sometimes we bring the scripture to lay upon it. And sometimes the experience. And so these all things work together to bring that about. And maybe you want to speak to how all of those things work together with Myers-Briggs.
Well, to start off with, I wouldn't lead a church unless I was a Wesleyan.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just get that straight. You said Wesleyan in both of your comments today. I wouldn't try to pastor a church that didn't believe in holiness. That to me is suicide. I mean, if you can't take care of carnal nature, you're going to have a lot of fun in ministry. So first off that. So I'm just taking for granted that we're all Wesleyans. I'm talking from a Wesleyan persuasion in everything I say. The Holy Spirit, when I said saturate, that's what I'm talking about is the Holy Spirit. But what I don't know that you're not saying this time, but I think that there are a lot of tools that we should keep on the desk and not take them off simply because of our theological persuasion. I think there are things that we can learn. Like I'm going to recommend a book that's written by a Presbyterian that's helped me a whole lot in ministry. It's called Liberating Ministry from the Success Syndrome. Liberated Ministry from the Success Syndrome. It has the single best chapter I ever read on holiness in any book, and is written by Presbyterians. I'm not saying they're not for holiness. It's not generally what they're focused at. So that book has helped me so much because I want spiritual success, and that I think you're speaking into that, at least close. Maybe I got the same DNA. That book has helped me so much. I turned it into 2 preaching series in my ministry. I preached it twice because they give the seven giveaways of spiritual success in the local church, one of which is holiness. And that's the way I set up the church when I first got there. I got a hold of this book. And I really believe that these tools are just that. They are just tools. But they make us smarter. They give us more information to go with our inspiration. But certainly we're going to lean on the Holy Spirit more to change us, to make us, or to use us like we are, for His glory. So I just want to make sure that everybody, I might have been taken for granted that we were all thinking in that wavelength. But certainly we don't have a secular answer to a sacred issue. However, I have learned one thing I wrote on my list that I didn't say, and I'm done. My mentor taught me never compartmentalize your life between what is sacred and what is non-sacred. It's all sacred. And so what I have learned is when I was trying to free Wayne up about going to the hospital, the sense is that my mentor taught me, you may be in the study, Mike, locked in, and that feels very comfortable for you, and I know I love sometimes just stay in the study, but your kids want you to come to the sandbox, and you happen to be working at home. What he taught me was, don't think it's more sacred that you're in the study than in the sandbox, because this is holiness. The Spirit may complete that sermon in the sandbox with your child, And I learned that early in my ministry. That's the advantage of having a mentor that's walked the path. I learned it really early. He took all that false guilt off of me. And he said, don't compartmentalize your life. So I don't know if that helps everybody. I don't know what letter that would really hang you up if you have that letter. Maybe a J, I don't know. But anyway, the sense is, don't compartmentalize. It's all holy.
I want to address, so one thing I've done in ministry about saying, what do you do when somebody, I've always built a crew of people, 3 or 4, that when I didn't have staff, that were lay people, that I knew in them was this desire for excellence and this desire to complete. One time I even, when I'm my last church, I had what I called the functional board. I had my church board. We met 4 times a year. Then I had the functional board, which was, at first started all lay people who were gifted at management and leadership. And in my first church, it was only 3 people, right? But everything that was going to be done was going to be run through one of those 3 people. So when somebody came with an idea or a thought, I said, man, that's a wonderful idea or thought. You ought to talk to Sue about that, because that's under Sue's realm. And I knew that what Sue would do was make sure that all the T's were crossed, all the I's were dotted, all the, you know what I mean? Or she would pull the plug on it and not let it happen. But then I spent a lot of time with the 3 people, you know, that was there saying, okay, what are we after? Where are we going? But then that removed the pressure off of me to all of a sudden start chasing a rabbit trail of what somebody else wanted me to do, you know, so, but that's all.
I got one announcement, and then you guys can close this. On the back table right back there, there's a bunch of posters that have been made. This is about district assembly. Obviously, you guys have seen that the dates have changed. There's a lot that has changed about it from what we were told. And we really are trying to, Carrie is really trying to make it a worship event, that it's not just a business meeting with some singing and praying going on. We also have cards made. I'm well aware in this digital age that stuff like this doesn't fly with everybody, but at the end of the day, you still hand out business cards to a lot of people that you meet with. So we have them for everybody, for people in your church. We also want it to be a family event where people would actually show up to this. I mean, it's going to be completely different than probably anything that has ever been done in terms of district assembly from what we've been told. So Noah from the Lansdale Church designed these. We have cards. They have the dates on them. And you're going to keep getting invited. We actually shot a video with Carrie that's going to be sent to your church to personally invite them for every single church. It'll say, hey, Emmanuel Lansdale Church, this is Carrie Willis, and we want you to show it as best you can and invite people, that it's not just going to be some boring, hey, we sit there and take a few votes. And that's not criticism of what's been done before. But they're back there. Please take them and put them up. And we don't probably have thousands of these today, but I will get them to you. I'll personally bring them to you if we need to, so that you have them just to hand out. Anything else you want to say about it?
Yes, and you know that we have 4 hours of PCDC, so if you stay for lunch, you're still learning. That's peer-to-peer learning. I believe that's the best learning that we do, honestly, is after if you stay for lunch, we'll get to hammer some of this stuff out around tables, and just you can get back with us and tell us where we blew it. But this is spontaneous stuff, you know. We didn't plan. I didn't know the questions. But I believe the Lord can use even spontaneity. I happen to be an N. Is that the intuition people, the spontaneous people? So we're learning to love each other. What I've learned is with my wife and I, she has 4 letters, I have the other 4. And we learned that, you know what? If we can really get together, we can have the whole Myers-Briggs alphabet. We can have it all, you know. Sometimes we do that, Brother BW, not often, but we shoot for it. Yeah. So we want to have a prayer. And BW, you're the last name I said. Would you come up here and pray over us? And there will be lunch in the cafe. I got to be here Friday night for the grand opening of the cafe. If they have anything they gave Friday night, you're going to want to spend your $10. I mean, they call him a food service guy, but he's really a chef. And he got up for a few moments and told about his ministry, and he wept talking about cooking. I mean, I said, now that's worship right there. That counts. That is worship. So Thanks, Dave, for offering that to us. I don't think you'll get a better $10 meal anywhere else unless you got a gift card to Wawa or something like that.
Are we done? Our precious Father, we are indeed thankful to you for the fact that we can put our minds, our heads, and our hearts together, and that we can learn from one another even as we learn from you. And that when it's all said and done, it will be because we have done it together that will make the difference. We're so grateful today for those that have led us, for Pastor Rocky's presentation and for the comments that have been made and for the instruction given. But Lord, what we need most is we need your divine guidance, that as we implement this and figure it out and put it into place in our individual settings, that we will bring honor and glory to you, and that we will give you credit for what you have done and are doing, and that we will recognize, Lord, that even when we think we've got all of the answers, we still need you desperately to give the guidance. And so help us, Lord. There's some exciting things happening on our district. We just stand back in absolute awe at what you're doing. And we just pray, God, that you would help us to be in tune with you by being in tune with the Spirit of God that is at work in a wonderful way among us. Guide us as we will go from this place. Bless the food as we will share together in it. And may we glorify you in all that we say and do. In Christ's wonderful name we pray. Amen. Good job, everybody. It's great.
Follow Dave. He knows where